Please introduce yourself and state why you are running for state assembly.
Hello, I am State Representative Sondy Pope. I live in the village of Mount Horeb, and I have been representing the 80th Assembly District since that would have been 2012. First of all, I want to thank you, Paul, and the Oregon Community Media, because with COVID, we have had such difficulty reaching our voters and getting our message to people. And because I respect the health of my constituents and myself and my family, I decided I would not go door to door this time. So actually speaking to constituents has been well nigh on to impossible. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to the folks in Oregon. And COVID has really made such a difference this time in how we campaign. We are just reduced to social media and things like this. We can't go to the big gatherings. I can't talk to people at their door. So I really do appreciate this effort, and thank you for doing that. You asked why I was running, and I can tell you that in the years I've been serving in the Assembly, I've focused my work on three main areas, and that would be K-12 public education. That's the reason I was recruited to run in the first place. The Wisconsin correctional system. I have been the ranking member and on the correctional committee for many years, and consumer protection. Those are three areas that I have kind of fallen into an area of expertise. And I really feel like all three of those are sort of in a hot spot right now when it comes to the legislative response and activity. So I really want to get back to the Capitol and continue my work. And I dare to say that corrections and education are going to be two of the big issues that we in the legislature are going to have to grapple with. Education being so severely impacted by COVID. Many kids are in virtual school. They don't know from week to week, am I going to go back to the building? Am I going to be home? Parents don't know how they're going to manage watching over their children and doing their jobs. And it's just been tremendously difficult for school districts trying to figure out how to pay for virtual education. Many of their students didn't have home computers, so they've been providing hotspots. And through all of this, we have discovered that broadband is going to be another big issue that we face in the legislature. So I feel like I have created a certain amount of expertise and certainly passion on some issues that are going to be at the forefront of the legislature this year. And so I want to take that back and get to work solving some of those problems.
What are some of the most significant issues impacting your district?
Well, clearly not just my district, the entire state and perhaps the whole nation is going to be dealing with COVID, one way or another. And it's embarrassing to be from Wisconsin and see what a mess we have allowed ourselves to get into. And primarily because people don't want to put on a mask, which, the mask mandate is out there. The Republican leadership in the legislature is fighting it, in fact, suing with your taxpayer dollars, suing the governor over this issue, and we're yet to see what will happen. I've had constituents call me, and we'll have conversations about not wanting to wear a mask. And most of them will just tell me they think it's uncomfortable. And this whole mask issue has become political, and for reasons I simply cannot fathom, why you would want to risk your health and that of people that you are around by not wearing a mask is absolutely beyond my understanding. So it's sort of like this is an issue that we are inviting into our state, and we're feeding it and letting it grow when in fact we should be stopping it. So COVID certainly is going to continue to be a problem. I had one constituent call me, and we were having a conversation about his discomfort over wearing a mask, and he thought perhaps people were scowling at him because he didn't have a mask on. And I said, really, how painful is that? He said, well, they're just uncomfortable. And I said, well, if you don't like your mask, trust me, you're really not going to like your ventilator. And with that, he chuckled and we shared a laugh. And he said, yeah, I guess you're right. It's really not that terrible. So people can be reasonable given an opportunity to talk about it, but they seem to just bristle at the idea of being ordered to wear a mask. And then another immediate priority for us, and particularly those of us here in the 80th Assembly District, we've got so much of the driftless area in this district where broadband service is sketchy. It's not fast, it's not powerful, and so students are disadvantaged, businesses are disadvantaged, all people really are disadvantaged without broadband accessible. So my belief is that broadband should be just like electricity, treated like a utility. Everybody should have it. We should spend what we have to spend to get it to them. And anymore, if you don't have access to broadband, it's clearly a disadvantage to your entire life and certainly your community. I remember the village of Monticello had broadband at the public library and City Hall. And so it was available for about 2 blocks around, and the rest of the village didn't have it, which was awful. So another issue in the Assembly for the 80th District is going to be water quality. I was in fact part of the Water Quality Task Force, and we traveled all over the state of Wisconsin, and we learned a lot about water quality that we didn't know going in. We first started because of some water testing that had failed miserably down in southwestern Wisconsin, but then we learned so much more in our travels. The unfortunate thing is that when this was all over and done with, we certainly knew what the problems were. We were unable to do anything about it because the bills that we passed in the Assembly, and they weren't strong enough and they weren't enough of them, but they stalled in the Senate and nearly nothing was accomplished by all of that, except now we are even more aware of the problems that we face. So those two issues are going to be big for people in my district, and I think the response to COVID in terms of providing unemployment insurance payments and other financial help for businesses and people is going to continue to be an issue for us.
What, if anything, should this legislature do to support Wisconsin citizens during the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think our response to unemployment issues has not been good. We have been training people. Things are getting better. I think the most difficult cases were the ones that have gotten pushed back and are now piled up in the background waiting to be dealt with. And, a certain amount of investigation is we are incumbent to know that the money that we're handing out is handed out where it needs to be. So they're being thorough in their investigations, but not rapid. I don't feel like we've done a great job with that. Maybe it will get better with new leadership, and we'll do the best we can, but I'm not proud of the job that we have done. So that will continue to be a problem. As a legislator, I have introduced many times and will continue to introduce the paid family medical leave insurance program. And I don't think a lot of people know about that. The odd thing is we are the only industrialized nation on the planet that doesn't offer this. So if you are a pregnant woman and you give birth and you're employed, about the most you're going to get is 2 weeks if you're not employed by, for example, the state or some government entity. This is just unheard of in other countries. I hired a woman to work in my office a few years ago who was from Canada, and she became pregnant, and she said, my husband and I expect that we have an entire year to bond with our child. I will be home. And while the state does offer better benefits than most, it was just far inferior to what she expected coming out of Canada. So she decided that she would just leave the employment of the state and she is still home raising that new baby, and good for her. I think it's just laughable, embarrassing, that the United States of America does such a poor job. And I think people fail to understand as well that this is a program that is operated like unemployment insurance. It is it is paid for by the employee contribution and not by the employer contribution. So it's a program that we should embrace. Had we had it in place, there would be a lot of families better off when COVID hit in um, earlier this year. So those are two things that I think will be coming up as long, and also another fight about accepting Medicaid dollars.
COVID-19 and lack of revenue from state taxes will result in tighter budgets at every level of government. When looking at a difficult budget, what would your priorities be?
This one's easy for me. My first priority has been and will continue to be K-12 public education. I think it is absolutely foundational to any democracy to educate its citizenry at no cost to the best of our ability. And one of the things that has become very problematic for funding education is special education. Right now, we in the state of Wisconsin are reimbursing the cost, the actual cost of educating special needs children at 25%. I want that number to be up to at least 60% with an end target of 90%. And I can tell you where 90% comes from. The private voucher schools in Wisconsin, paid for with your tax dollars, but they are private schools, are reimbursing special needs children cost of education at 90% and fully funding in some special cases. So if it goes beyond what's normal, they'll fully fund it. Why we are treating special needs children in private school differently than our public school students is, I have no understanding for that. But I do know that we need to fund our special needs children to at least the percentage of 60. So that's going to be something that I'm going to take up and fight for. I have and will continue to do. It wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at our rainy day fund. I mean, how much rain do we need to consider using that as part of our budget response? And I think people need to remember that our budget reflects our priorities. So whatever Governor Evers hands to the legislature for consideration are his and his administration's priorities. From that point, each of the two houses take a whack at it. They change it to whatever degree they feel is necessary. And both houses have been in the Republican majority. So when they are done, it goes to the Joint Finance Committee. It's a 16-member committee made up of 12 Republicans and 4 Democrats. And they continue to change the budget until they offer something to us to vote on. So when I say it reflects our priorities, our budget reflects our priorities, it kind of depends on who us is. So right now, I can't make any kinds of real predictions because number one, I don't know who's going to be the majority in either house come next January. But I do know that Governor Evers, being our education governor and a man I have admired for probably 25 years, will do the best he can possibly do for education. So I have hope for that.
For months, the topic of police brutality disproportionately seen against members of black citizens and police reform has been raised repeatedly, as has civil unrest after the shooting of George Floyd, then Jacob Blake in Kenosha. What do you think the legislature should do in regards to police reform and use of deadly force, as well as managing civil unrest and limiting property damage?
Well, to begin with, I think there is a national awareness, very overdue, of white privilege and racism, and we need to address that not just as a legislature, but as individuals. It's everyone's responsibility. Everyone, every day, everywhere, everything you do. So, starting from that position, I'm going to talk about police in probably a different vein than most people because I know my law enforcement here in the 80th district. And mind you, I have 3 counties and I have 3 cities and many villages and townships. So lots of jurisdictions, different kinds of law enforcement at different levels. And there is no blanket response for any one of them. It depends on the community they're in, and that's all fine and good. The legislature cannot come up with a solution that fits all. But we certainly can do things like ban chokeholds. There's no place in the United States of America for chokeholds to be allowable. I think we should ask our law enforcement agencies to reevaluate their practices. That doesn't mean that we come in and tell them what to do. We ask them to reevaluate their practices using standards that are approved by associations and other entities. But this isn't something that we are expert in, we, the legislators, are expert in and should be taking responsibility for. We certainly need to take a look at incarceration. And again, I will tell you, as a member of the Corrections Committee for so many years, I've visited nearly every prison in Wisconsin. And the obvious number of African American and other minorities in prison is astonishing. And then when you take time to find out why are they there, that's also astonishing. And that's on us. We need to do this very differently, and it's going to take sweeping change. It's going to help if the legislature would do simple things like increase the minimum wage from $6.30 an hour to $15. We're going to lift so many people out of poverty, and you have to know that poverty drives crime. We have to do better for education. There are pockets of schools in Wisconsin who live in poverty, that exist in poverty. Their students live in poverty. And one of the biggest indicators of student success and achievement is their family income. So I think we have a responsibility to do a better job by people in that way. Also, we should address housing needs, food access. There's so much that we as a state can do to change how white privilege exists and racism continues. But when it comes right down to it, it's each one of us individually. And I might add that I really am not too concerned about any of the police departments or forces in my district. In fact, this year we had a horrific murder here in Mount Horeb. And it was so random, committed completely by a random individual, unrelated, unknown to the victim. And our Dane County Sheriff and our Mount Horeb Police Department and all the surrounding enforcements came together and they solved that murder. But it was through hard work and investigation and resolve to get to the end, and they did. And I have utmost confidence in how our law enforcement works here in the 80th district. I never get complaints from my constituents about mistreatment by law enforcement, which is not to say all law enforcement is perfect and right. They certainly are not. So we are comfortable today, and we need to remain vigilant to remain comfortable. And as far as looting and damaging and protesting and all of that is concerned, peaceful protest is part of what the United States of America came together. the Boston Tea Party was a protest, and it delivered us this democracy. So we need to keep that in mind. Peaceful protests should be welcome. I participated in it. I still do on occasion, but violent looting, arrest them, charge them, get them off the streets. And I watched with my own eyes as after peaceful protest would end, looters would come out armed with baseball bats and rocks and bricks, and they were intent on looting, period. Those people need to be arrested. And I also understand that there were times when if law enforcement had stepped in and hauled some of those people away, it would have escalated what was happening. So we rely on video, and many of those people have been caught and will be caught for what they have done. So we just need to be sane and sensible in our response and charge those who should be charged.
What are your qualifications for the office, and why are you the best candidate for the office?
Well, under these unprecedented times, I think we want to have people in the Capitol who know what they're doing, who are experienced, who have, I wouldn't say necessarily been there before, because that really isn't much of a criteria. Not everybody has been there before. But I think I am pretty highly valued in terms of the education field in the legislature. I have been the ranking member on this committee. Most of the time I've been there, I've been the chair of this committee. I understand the funding formula, the players. It helps to know who the players are. But I believe in democracy. Everybody has the opportunity to challenge us and ought to challenge us. We shouldn't just walk in unchallenged to our job every 2 years. That's what democracy is about. And I have to be out and convince my voters that I am representing their values. And they have a responsibility also to let me know if I am or I am not. And we get lots of voter contact and citizen contact in my office. But absolutely challenge and find ways to bring something better to the Capitol than what you see. It's how I got there. I was recruited to run, but I was running on an education issue that was completely odd to me. It was, I will even tell you about it. There was a law being proposed. It was called the No Social Promotion Law. Every fourth grader, eighth grader, and high school senior would take a test. If they failed it, they would repeat fourth grade, or they would repeat eighth grade, or their diploma wouldn't be signed. And those kinds of high stakes tests made no sense to me. So I pushed back about it. And through that effort, I was recruited to run for the assembly. And with some convincing, I decided I would do that. So that's how I got there. Everybody should consider being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And I believe it doesn't pay to stand outside and throw rocks at the building. If you want change, go inside and make it. So yes, I think people should be more than willing to step up and run for public office, because it is a service, it is a privilege and an honor, but I don't own it. So yeah.
Please introduce yourself and state why you are running for state assembly.
My name is Chase Binnie, and I'm actually not a politician. I'm coming from the private small business world. I'm a real estate broker, and my wife is a teacher. We have a house in Mount Horeb where we raise our 2 daughters, and actually we have a pet pig. I'm running, to be honest, to show my daughters that they too can stand up for their values, even when the odds are against them. I want to teach them by example to take action and be brave. I've actually seen this district go unchallenged for the last 8 years and 10 years before that. So my opponent, Sondy, has been in office for 18 years. And a lot of people I've talked with on this campaign have been wondering, well, what's our representative doing? And they haven't seen her visit, or they if they have seen our work, it's not in a very bipartisan way. We need somebody who has a fresh perspective, a new candidate who will work together for bipartisan solutions to get Wisconsin back on its feet and to give people confidence again. We have just a chaotic time right now with pandemic, different social issues, and I'm running to bring some confidence to Wisconsin again, that we can recover, we can get back on our feet, and we can actually come back stronger than before the pandemic.
What are some of the most significant issues impacting your district?
Some of the big issues in my district, and I've knocked on a few thousand doors. I've talked with a lot of voters, and so I came into this with my own views of what I think is important. But what changed throughout the campaign is I was absorbing what everyone was saying. That's truly what I believe a representative should do, is take what the voters are saying and kind of integrate all of that into a cohesive plan. And so one of the big things was educational options. This pandemic was a surprise to everyone. We didn't really know how to handle it. In the future, I want to learn from what we've done this year, and I want to take that and make a preemptive plan in case there's ever anything like this again, so that we're not shuffling and pushing kids around, kind of what I call crisis schooling, where it's like, oh, here we go, this is the plan now. Oh, we got to change it. No, here's the plan. We keep changing it, and that inconsistency has caused so much stress for parents who are having to shuffle around their work schedules, and it's actually caused a lot of stress on the kids. I was a kid who I needed to know the schedule each day. Mom, what are we doing today? I needed to know almost everything, all up to dinner time, for me to feel like I had a grasp on what's going on today. And there's a lot of kids like that, especially in today with such information overload. We've got technology, tablets. It's really hard for kids, and I think we underestimate that. So I think we owe it to the kids to give them a consistent plan. And I do believe we should give parents a choice, some kind of hybrid option or a choice, because one size fits all doesn't fit all. The other major thing that I've been hearing is businesses, whether that's your a small business, a large business with many employees. This is not the easiest time. In fact, we've been seeing a lot of our local businesses, some that have been in business for 50 years, closing down for good. And I see shops closing. I see restaurants quitting. On Craigslist, you just see a list of all these people are selling off the chairs and kitchen equipment for pennies on the dollar. And in working in real estate, I see retail buildings all up for sale. It's not good now. It's not going to be good when the domino effect really comes into play. So I believe that the policies that we've set in place, although we had to take some action quickly, I think what they've done is actually hurt the small local business, and they've helped the national chains. The fast food chains are doing fine. Walmart is doing fine. Amazon is doing amazing right now, but our main streets are suffering. So that's those are kind of the two major issues I've heard.
What, if anything, should this legislature do to support Wisconsin citizens during the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic?
No, balance. Balance is key here, because, like I've already said, a lot of the things we had to do was a very, very quick reaction and put a plan in place, just so we are taking the furthest steps we can. But now, after we've learned a lot about the virus, we've learned who's the most vulnerable. We've learned how to protect ourselves as practical as possible. And we've also we're kind of on that edge of finding solutions as far as therapies, treatments, even vaccines. So when I look at what I can do at a state level, there's a lot that's already being done. We've got grants, programs. There's another Wisconsin grant for small businesses that's going to be released in about a week. And we have stimulus checks. For mortgages are in forbearance if people need that. Student loan payments are at 0 interest. So those are many, many ways that are helping people financially get through it. But for me, the biggest thing is letting people return to work, letting businesses open for those who are comfortable going out. We just had, which was a Tony Evers policy that was pushed back. The bar and restaurant capacity limits, and that I know the Tavern League is fighting hard to be able to open just like any other business that's allowed to be open. And that's one of the vulnerable businesses that I don't know how many are going to survive. I've already seen there was another big one in another popular place in Oregon that closed just 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's hitting home for a lot of people, and these are sometimes the staple classic restaurants of our community where high school kids would get their first job there washing dishes. I truly believe we need those kind of businesses to stick around. So we've been doing a lot for the COVID-19 pandemic as far as the virus financially, but I do think we need to start to balance that with the other concerns that are popping up, like depression. Suicide has been on the rise since the beginning of it. Kids are just not doing so well away from their normal sports. Even just being in a classroom with other kids is just so good for their mental, social well-being.
COVID-19 and lack of revenue from state taxes will result in tighter budgets at every level of government. When looking at a difficult budget, what would your priorities be?
Well, that definitely would be a difficult budget. And just like in my family, if I have a slow season in my business, we tighten up spending. We cut the subscriptions we don't need. We cut out some entertainment, the luxuries, the things that we like to spend money on in good times. We'll need to have to cut those down back to the essentials. And in the same way as I would do in my own family, I think we would need to do with government, and looking toward what are the essentials, what are the things we can temporarily put on hold, and what are the things that would be more of a long-term cut. And I know that's scary for a lot of people, and it actually translates to sometimes people's jobs, and that's not a good thing. But often I think we are too afraid to tighten up a government budget. And what happens is over the years, we add to it, and it's easy to add to a government spending. It's really hard to kind of pull things back because of that personal investment that a lot of people would have. So in no way would I want to raise taxes right now. Now is a time where we need to encourage work, encourage business, and truly that's where our tax revenue comes from. If we don't have the private sector producing things, creating jobs, selling products, there's no tax revenue to play with anyway. So I think we need to encourage business to start up again, encourage people to hire employees. And the only way to do that is to keep taxes where they're at or even lower them so that we can encourage that tax revenue to come in again.
For months, the topic of police brutality disproportionately seen against members of Black citizens and police reform has been raised repeatedly, as has civil unrest after the shooting of George Floyd, then Jacob Blake in Kenosha. What do you think the legislature should do in regards to police reform and use of deadly force, as well as managing civil unrest and limiting property damage?
So there's a lot to this question because it splits into a few different aspects. So I'll try to break down my views on each aspect. First of all, no matter how you look at it, these are tragic events. If I could have done anything to stop it, I would have. The first aspect, I think, is the police reform or use of deadly force. And police reform, we have made great strides in creating more accountability for people working in that career field. It is a job that is very risky, and it's risky for the police officer and for citizens. Anytime there's a confrontation, a police officer doesn't know if it's going to escalate, and it could be a split second. So that's a job where you're almost always on guard. As a citizen, especially in certain communities where you've seen a lot of police activity or you've seen people arrested, there is this being on guard from police officers. And that's reinforced by a lot of the things we've been seeing with different the videos of these events. So I think on both sides of it, we need to address we've got accountability for the police officers, body cams, a lot of different police reform in discussion right now. And that's a bipartisan thing. The Democrats want maybe want more, but Republicans also want police accountability, and that's in discussion right now. So I'm all in favor with trying to find where that middle ground is, where we can have both parties agree that these are all things that would be beneficial for all. Having said that, I think some of the policies proposed, when they say defund the police, I know that doesn't mean exactly what they say, but I think that would be a really bad idea to send someone unarmed into a situation. I've actually talked with social workers who, in tragic events, they had coworkers who went to just a social work call at a home and ended up, they were killed in something that escalated. They didn't know it would happen, but things can change. So I don't think that we should send police officers into any dangerous situation without the ability to defend their own life. So having said that, anytime there is a tragic, an event that causes a lot of frustration, I mean, a lot of the protests we've seen coming out of this deep frustration where they're feeling like nothing's being done. And I think I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of peaceably assembling, to express our grievances, to gain attention for an issue that's being ignored. But when, on the last part of your question about property damage, I think there's no excuse for damaging property, no excuse for violence of any kind to get your message across. That if there was just a random building in the middle of nowhere that they said, hey, you can burn this, that would, I feel like that'd be okay. But burning somebody's business that they've worked hard, I mean, that's just adding to the problem. So I definitely was pretty frustrated when our governor, within I think 5 hours of one of these, the event in Kenosha, he labeled it racism without any other reason but except looking at the video. And I think that just stoked the flames. I think he should have taken a leadership stance where he was more balanced in his approach, where he withheld his judgment until the investigation was done, because what it did was it kind of emboldened the movement to get even more angry about an event that actually a lot of people didn't even know what led up to the event. So a lot of things that are out of context can can be, well, when they're out of context, they're out of context. So I'm all in favor of taking a reasonable approach. We can't live without police officers, but we can't deny that there is unfair treatment.
What are your qualifications for the office, and why are you the best candidate for the office?
So I told you why I'm running. One of the reasons was I just saw the same candidate being reelected again and again, and having no challengers. And I think what that does is when you've been in politics 18 years, nothing personal. I've talked with Sondy. I think I could have a lunch with her and we'd have a great conversation. But I think what happens after 18 years of being in there, you really can lose touch with what's going on with your constituents in your own district. And the thing about that is like not being challenged in any of the recent elections, that makes it even harder, because who are you going to hear from? It's probably only the most passionate people who are going to reach out to your phone or your email. And that might even be just part of your supportive base, or just the frustrated on the opposite end. So what I've done is, not coming from politics at all, I'm a small business owner. I work with a lot of just typical families in my district. I do real estate projects. I hire contractors. I generate tax revenue for our state with my business. And what that does is gives me insight where I can make policy that helps our local economy, and not hold people back. I've also been door knocking almost every town in my district, meeting several thousand people. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of miles in my tennis shoes. But what I got out of that was hearing what people's concerns are, hearing what the common issues that they're thinking about. And I've told you about a few of them. And I know Sondy, in a recent interview, has admitted she hasn't done anything for the campaign. No doors, no events. She said she doesn't like social media. But I'm thinking, well, how are you going to make yourself accessible to the average voter? How are you going to hear from them? And that's what I've done. Is I've talked with the progressives, I've talked with moderates, I've talked with conservatives, and I understand many sides of each issue, and I plan to work on solutions that are win-win for all my constituents. I lean conservative on a lot of issues. I'm socially quite liberal. I mean, there are things about me that I think we could gain a lot of traction in some bipartisan bills. Marijuana legislation, think could be a really big benefit for our agriculture community. I also think it would make law enforcement issues actually decrease. Clean energy, things like that, where I don't really follow exactly the party line on. I think there are a lot of people in my district that are looking to go beyond party politics, and that's kind of what I'm looking to bring.